we're kind of blazing through this lightweight part of the content pretty quickly. So, we have a couple of options. I would prefer we don't start digging into some of the debugging stuff that we're going to hit tomorrow, this afternoon. I'd rather we kind of approach that with a fresh mind. But a shorter day today probably wouldn't be too bad. We can maybe accelerate one of the sessions. We'll just see where we end up. And I know, Christian, you needed at least half an hour. Maybe if you needed a bit more time, we had more DPDK type questions, feel free to fill the gap. But in terms of pulling and pushing code, so here are the steps. These are all published on the wiki in terms of how to get the code using either SSH or HTTPS. Personally, I just find it just so much easier. The steps in the profile are already there in terms of adding your RSA key. I know you can do a secure push with HTTPS by putting in your username, password, and setting all that up. It's just too much of a shag for me. I just prefer to use SSH. And if I use HTTP, it means I have pretty much no intention of pushing anything back. I just want to get the code and play with it. But you can do it. It's just not something I do. When I do use SSH, make sure you get the clone, and some of the shading isn't working out too well, but what you should see highlighted is clone with the commit message hook, so that way when you actually push back up, because we do use Gerrit, it'll actually work. Otherwise, you won't be able to push. So please make sure you get that. Obviously, when you log in, it'll insert your own user ID, and then by and large, it's pretty straightforward to actually get the code. In terms of pushing, I use git push origin, just pretty much standard git commands. Other folks, prefer git review. If you're familiar with git review, by all means, use it. I just don't, because I work on stuff with GitHub, and I just tend to stick with the same command set over and over again. But just curious, and again, I'm trying not to do the show of hands things, but GitHub, Gerrit, which one are people using most of, or Patchwork? Do people use Gerrit, or use on projects with Gerrit? Okay. Okay. Cool. I was just curious, because I have some folks who have absolutely nothing to do at all with any Gerrit systems. They either use the GitHub pull request, or you're doing more stuff with Patchwork, that kind of stuff. So that's pretty fundamental, simple stuff. We use a committer based mechanism in Gerrit for approving code. So committable +2 code. You get feedback. Sounds like folks are fairly familiar with Gerrit, so I'm probably not going to dive into it that much. Bug reporting. So I could use some help. I was supposed to get this done, run out of time. I could use some help with someone who knows Jira, who would like to propose a process of how to, and a guideline, a tutorial, how to use Jira to enter a bug. I think it'd be really useful. If you go into Jira today, there's bugger all there. And there are bugs in the system. They're not heinous bugs, but there's more than like 2, which is the only things in Jira. So it'd be really useful if we could all get behind that. And I know one of the things we need is a set of very clear and easy steps. So if someone had time and wanted to contribute that, knows Jira, I'd be really open to it. So please give us a yell if you're interested in helping out. But it's pretty much just jira.fd.io to get access. But failing that, given that we don't have that process, or you can just go ahead and raise a Jira bug. At the moment, we are using email. We prefer to move towards Jira. But again, until we have the process, it's a bit unfair just to say, just go slam a bug in without any documented kind of tutorial on how we're going to do it. So when we do send stuff to VPP Dev, gather information as per the link below. I'll jump into that in a second. The other thing is just general housekeeping. Please don't send large amounts of outputs as text in line in your email. Not only does it make it really hard to read, the other thing is the mail server will eventually puke and tell you, this message is too large, I'm going to the moderator. And it just gets very annoying. So please use some sane tools like Gist or Pastebin. I can go through how Gist works if people are interested or not familiar with it. So on here, and just Control D, and what? Rate limit exceeded. Here's the good news. Who's been doing stuff on here?
You've been moderated.
I've been moderated. Oh my God, I've never had that happen before.
So about the mailing list.
Yeah. You son of a gun.
It's working.
Yeah.
As I found out.
There you go. Please use things like gist. And don't use Cisco network. Cisco corporate network. We must have hit a rate limit. That's never happened to me before. Trust me, gist works. Or you can use tools like Pastebin if you're not familiar with it. Pastebin, all these things are free. So here is some stuff. Make me a paste. Okay, excellent. So I get a URL. Here is some stuff. So if you've got large amounts of output, just keep it sorted with using tools like Pastebin. In terms of the types of information we need, and by all means, Dave and Damian and whoever else, feel free to jump in and augment this. First of all, how's the font? Can you guys and girls read that? Anyone not at the back? All good? Okay, getting a nod there. Going once, twice, thrice, done. Image version. Very helpful for us to know what the actual image is. This is taken from the your VPP cuddle output. So if you type in VPP cuddle, hit enter, you get this prompt. Same thing as DBG VPP. Do show version verbose. That's very important. It's also helpful to know what exact distro you're on. NIC types become very important as well. The NUMA configuration. Generally, just more information about the network topology. And some other useful things, what has worked and what hasn't worked. Like I'm trying to do this. Well, sometimes we don't know if the basics have even worked, like if basic ping and connectivity functionality or connectivity is being established before we start layering on features. Packet tracer output is huge, and the binary API trace, we'll be covering that on Wednesday morning, so we'll go through how to use the binary API, the API trace, how to capture your session. So you can go in, do a whole bunch of commands, and at the end you have a file that represents all the things you just did. You can replay that back over and over, and that's a useful thing to show us, because then we can replay back what you've done and see if we have the same issues. And then core files. So again, there's a lot of information here. We don't want to see all that dumped into an email. And again, even in Jira, you wouldn't want that stuff just pasted into an empty text field. So please try and put these things into kind of a sane kind of way of representing stuff like Pastebin or gist. And I'm very determined. I must know. Will it work now? Magic 8 ball. No. Man, this better work tomorrow. I'll just say that. Nudge, nudge, hint, hint.
It does say authenticate request to get a higher limit. Maybe you should authenticate.
Maybe I don't want to. I never had to before. Why should I start now? But point taken. I will try that just in case. But I'd hate for everyone else to kind of get hamstrung with that. So that is pretty much it in terms of bug reporting. I had wanted to go through a couple of simple things that occasionally you might see. Let's go here. So I know one thing, and by all means call out some stuff if you've seen. Oops, that's not going to do it for me. Let's not do that. No. So oftentimes I've noticed, especially in the Vagrant environment, it'll come up and it'll say things like, no network, this interface has been blacklisted, no network driver found. And you've done all the right things, you've cleared the IP address off. That's usually the first one. What VPP does is when it looks for PCI interfaces, if it has an IP address, it leaves it alone, and you get a blacklist message when you first start up VPP. But sometimes you've done all the right things, and you still get this weird, there's no network driver associated with this interface, blacklist, blah, blah, blah. More often than not, there's something gone wrong with the actual kernel mod not being loaded. Generally, the first thing I do is have a look here. This seems to come up more with the Vagrant system. I'm not exactly sure why. Occasionally, if you're bringing things up and down and up and down and up and down, especially if you do Vagrant reload, sometimes the kernel mods don't get loaded correctly. I have tried using, I'm going to butcher his name, Stephen, email of Heminger, yeah. Who, as folks know, really knows his stuff. He's a kernel committer. He posted a command, a D message. I tried it. It didn't work with this particular problem when I had it. I just find if you mod probe, UIO, mod probe, IGB, UIO, things just start back up, fire up VPP, life's all good. Other problems I've seen, no huge tables, so you can see that I have no huge tables free now. The reason that is I actually have a running instance of VPP. But if I had somehow orphaned, so like I run in Emacs, sometimes that Emacs session gets orphaned, or my SSH connection's gone away, VPP's still running, I can't attach to it, and I've forgotten that it's still there, and I go fire it up. Those huge tables have been allocated to an already existing VPP process, so you could kill -15 that process. If you do that, please make sure to have a look at, and we'll go into this a little bit. Actually, this works, but it's linked, so. There's a shared memory structure here, which contains some data structures that are used, in-memory database, that kind of thing for while VPP is running. So if you kill the system, here's some cleanup. So if you end up kill -9ing it, for argument's sake, just the middle of development, we're not suggesting you do this in production. This is just banging away on your machine. You might want to go in and clean some of these things up. Any other nice cleanup tips? Quick and dirty. This is talking about, normally kill -15 cleans everything up and is pretty good. I've covered, when I've seen at least the Vagrant system with the kernel mods not being there, I've covered, blacklisting, huge tables, normally for existing process. If there is an existing process and huge tables still allocated, I take the easy way out and I vagrant reload. I'll admit it. I'm a vagrant reloader. Any other advice? Damien looks itching to say something.
Yeah, I wanted to say that the how VPP is using huge pages is a bit different than what people are used to with DPDK. So we are creating the separate mount. We are not using the /mount/huge or something. So we are using a separate mount. And we are actually using trick with lazy mounting. So basically, we create the huge pages, and then we lazy unmount that specific mount point. So when even if VPP crashes or it's killed, it will basically unmount and it will remove the files. So you will hardly have a situation that the files are still there and they are consuming your huge pages memory. So just as a comment, if you are trying to see where the huge pages files are, when VPP is running, you will not see them because they are not showing in the mount table.
Yeah, because I went down that road too and couldn't find them, scratching my head going, oh, I'm obviously doing it wrong. Thanks, dude. So now I just thought we'd spend some time together getting our environment set up for tomorrow. All right, so here's some scripts. The first one, and I'll leave this up here, so I'll just talk through them so you can get them, but please, now is a good time to get these scripts. And because once the slide's gone, you have to wait till I publish them. So please get these scripts. What's the first one? You can click on it and see what it is. It's pretty innocuous. It's just a very basic form of the script that Nikos used for his Docker demo, but instead of loading Docker containers and linking them, we're just going to create some pretty basic namespaces and link them together. I believe that beginning of that script tries to kill the namespace if it exists, so it should be safe to apply it to your machine if you followed along with Nikos. Should be safe to do that now. But this is one that you're going to want to run once you reboot. Beyond that, it's fine, right? So yeah, that's the simple net namespace. So there'll be two namespaces created in separate /24 networks, and then the next script is our max swap conf. So that contains a couple of things that you probably want to have a look at. The first is it adds the AF packet interfaces into VPP. That's very innocuous. The bit that may not be innocuous that you just might want to have a fiddle with, we probably won't use it too much over the next couple of days, is I set a IP address on the interface that you're probably using for virtual networking, with VirtualBox, the private network. So just have a look at that, make sure you're fine with it. If you want to change it, you can. It's not going to impact any of the stuff that we'll be doing over the next couple of days. When we get to some of the Ethernet input stuff and tracing, then we'll go hack at the Vagrant file. We'll do that separately. So far, so good. So pretty simple net namespace stuff, pretty basic config that we'll punt in once VPP started. Everyone's seeing from the same dance book. I'm going to skip the GDB init and come back to it. Once you've run that net namespace script and VPP is running, right? It's kind of an important corollary, and you've inputted the config file, you should be able to ping. So I'll wait till everyone kind of has it, and then once you've got it, we can walk through together. I'll do it at the same time as you guys and girls and make sure we're all got a working system. And then the GDB init. So by all means, I'm sure a lot of you already have your own GDB init. Feel free to kind of just copy and paste the bits you like and throw away the bits you don't. There's only a couple of core bits. The first one is handling SIG user events. So if you start typing stuff using VPP cuddle blah, it's going to cause a SIG interrupt in the middle of your debugging. And that, we're not going to be using VPP cuddle or the CLI much at all during the debugging, but in case you do, I tend to kind of turn that off and just make it ignored. So that's the first line in GDB init. The next line, yeah.
There's one important thing that SIG user one guy, will mess up, which is that the ARP handling ends up using that mechanism. That it actually, that in a multi-thread case, you're also hooking API messages back, back to CPU 0 to go program the table. So you absolutely want to do that. Otherwise, you just get this annoying blurt, and you'll wonder why the other end isn't doing ARP resolution correctly.
Is that only in the multi-threaded case? Because I've never seen that in my debugging. Maybe because I just have it off all the time now because I got so annoyed in the early days.
B, you probably have it off all the time.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a good one to put in there and then forget all about. And someday you won't have it there, and you'll be calling, wondering, what is this again? And then, the basic thing is SIG user one is a Q non-empty signal on the API, on the binary API channel, and you might just as well block it in GDB unless for some very extraordinary reason you want to watch. And if you want to watch, just go set a breakpoint in it.
There you go.
So
another good reason to have that. The other thing, I have pretty print in there. You can just ignore that. There's a couple of user commands, user-defined commands I have in that GDB init file. And we're going to be using those to kind of walk through the node structure. Well, it's node main T. vlib node main T is a type def. And we'll be dumping lengths of different things. There's also a user-defined command that will either dump the entire node registration list with its type, the name of the node and its type with a total, or you just chuck an extra palm at the end and it'll give us the total. The reason being is we can start looking at the totals of things on startup. We can have a look at the totals of things as they register. We can have a look at the totals of things as we load a plugin, and you just be able to decompose and inspect this stuff in real time. So that was the idea. As we walk through the code, you can actually see real numbers change and stuff change. So I thought that would be a handy thing to have.
Hey, Keith,
Yeah.
did you throw in there like set print element 0, which is the thing that'll allow it to print large arrays if you wanted to?
I didn't. I have a PVEC in there, which is printing the array.
This is just generally GDB. That's another good one people might want to choose to throw in there. Like if you're printing even a string, it'll eventually stop.
I have a PVEC, but that's more like size of division here.
Yeah, no. This is so that to turn off GDB's array print limit.
No, I don't.
Well, that's another good one people want to know about.
Is that one of the canned ones?
Yeah, it's a standard GDB command. Set print element 0.
Okay, I don't have that in the GDB init file, so
Good one for people to know about.
I'll update that.
I always have to, frankly, I don't have it in mind, and I always have to Google it, and I always swear when I do. So.
And again, I didn't put a lot of
Yep.
adult supervision into these. So if you put the wrong thing in, it's going to seg-v, but it's quick to start back up again.
Yeah.
And I did go to the trouble of actually putting a help file or document command in there. So when we get to that part, are folks ready to try this out? Not necessarily the debugging stuff, but just make sure that they have the namespaces built, they can ping. Anyone not ready? Anyone need a few more minutes? Okay, Simon, clock's ticking, dude.
That's very good. Can we get an MP2 of that?
Better than the Jeopardy. Do 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 I didn't mean to put you on the spot, Simon. It's all right, mate. I didn't. Yeah. So.
Maybe the 24 one.
So, first of all, is that font okay up the back? Bigger. Okay.
You've got a room of middle-aged men.
Oh, I can't say it. How's that? Better? Okay. And is that too low? People at the back, can you see what I'm writing? Sorry? Okay, so I can get that far back. Anyone at the back read what I've got there? Because it's kind of important. If I'm throwing stuff down the bottom of the buffer and you can't read it, then I'll just shrink my window. I just need to know now. No good?
No, I think the issue is that it's right behind people's heads.
Yeah. So if I did something like, even if we just truncate it a bit, it's still to say when. All right, cool. Okay, so you can see here I have 2 net namespaces. So if we were to do, and I just run as root, so excuse me if you type this thing and go, oh, sudo, you idiot. Yeah, I just don't do that. So you can see in here we have the 172.16.1/24, run it again for /2. Okay, these 2 net namespaces will not communicate until we actually have a look at our configuration file. So you've run the net namespace script, I assume. You see 2 net namespaces. They have those IP addresses. They should also be creating the links if you've run that. In here, you'll see that we create this. These are commands that go into VPP, and I'll show you how to execute a file full of commands into VPP in a second. But these are VPP specific commands. So we create the host interface named VPP1 that's going to create the AF packet interface, thanks to Damian's great work recently. On my machine, the interface is 080. Adjust accordingly. I set the IP addresses to blah, my favorite, because that's just what I run on that particular private network. Again, not going to hurt us, adjust accordingly. But these do need to match up. So these are the .1 counterparts to the .2 in the namespace, okay? So these will be the default gateway of that namespace. Huzzah, 2 namespaces talking by 2 routed interfaces. And then the IP probe neighbor. Now, we didn't talk too much about this. We're going to be running a debug image. So debug images have debug things turned on, and that gives us lots of really cool instrumentation and information, but at the cost of perhaps of performance and things like that. So even though it's still performant, blah, 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 we're shooting with a debug image. So things like when you first do your pings, you'll see some weird stuff like pings timing out. You'll see 2,000 milli response times, even though they're not really 2,000 milli response times. Running in a debug image, your mileage may vary in terms of the responsiveness. So in order to kind of front end things a bit, I've just run IP probe neighbor. So that's the moral equivalent of running ping, okay? And it just warms up the cache, ARP table, stuff like that. So far so good. We ready to move on to actually configuring this, and then we can go back and run the ping? Yes? No? Not seeing lots of nods. Maybe it's good we're not diving straight into GDB this afternoon, because I did say this was the interpretive dance bit, so I just want to make sure we have the environment set up. So I'm going to, I could have sworn, interesting. I must have this running somewhere else in a different buffer. Forgive me, David, I'm about to sin. No, I don't need help. I'm just going to do something horrible and ugly. Where do I have you running? All right. running somewhere, that's for sure. All right. Okay, so we'll be running from /VPP because the Git repo for Vagrant is mounted to /VPP, build root, install VPP, debug native, VPP bin, if I could type, VPP. So this is going to start debugging the debug image. So far, so good. Okay. So from here, just run Unix Interactive. This is going to give us a debug prompt. So far, so good. Wow, look at that. Life is good. So what we didn't see was we didn't see any blacklist errors. That's pretty cool. We did have a PCI device in here. Show Inter for beginners. So here's my gigabit Ethernet. What don't we see? Well, we don't see our AF packet interfaces. So it's not going to auto-discover those. So if we execute, and if you pull down the file into the same spot as the wget said to, execute that maxswap.conf, that is going to create those host interface, put the IP addresses, the .1s on our AF packet interfaces in VPP, and then send out an IP probe to the .2 address. So now when we do show inter, we should be able to see whole bunch of interfaces. Here's our AF packets connected to, AF packet interfaces connected to the namespaces, VPP1, VPP2. Going back to our shell, we should be able to do IP net namespace, exec in VPP1, ping -C3. Now this is going to be 1, so it's going to be 2.2. And there we go. We're now pinging between net namespaces. Sorry if that was a bit quick. So pinging from that net namespace. If we go back to GDB, we have our VPP cuddle, our VPP debug CLI prompt, and we do show interface and show error. So show error doesn't actually, it's showing counters here. Well, it's showing what actually the counts for each particular type of node. And we can see that we have 3 IP destination lookup misses, which is a bit odd. I need to look into that. Why would we have that rather than IP destination lookup misses when we're actually punting packets through? A mystery for another time. Let me just run this continuous.
And my bet is you're not going to see any of those counters anymore. You're not going to see any of those counters going up. Look at the fib counter.
Ah. Yeah. Bingo. Cool. This is why you bring the brains along. Okay. So I'm not hearing a lot of questions, and we're going to be using this environment to kind of walk through stuff.
So kind of got a problem getting it going.
Yeah.
Keith is dancing around that.
Sure.
So my first question is, when you ping, is that ping from one interface, one VPP interface to the other VPP interface?
Oh, and I assume everyone heard the question because he's mic'd. Are we pinging from one VPP interface to another? No, we're pinging from inside the IP net namespace. So if we have, so here, I'll try and do, let's do this. So inside here, we have a net namespace. It has an AF packet interface that connects into VPP. Let's draw VPP like this. Outside here, there's another AF packet interface. It's connected into a completely separate net namespace. And we'll call this net namespace VPP1. We'll call this one VPP2 because that's what they should be in your environment. Both these things inside the net namespaces are .2s, and they're pinging through VPP, not
So
across.
the two namespace means two containers or two
Yes.
different VMs?
Two different network namespaces, containers, if you like.
Okay.
They're not strictly, they're not running Docker or anything like that. We're just, if you have a look at the net namespace shell script, we're just creating a separate net namespace to
Okay.
encapsulate the IP and the routing. And
So the VPP is running in the host, right?
correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So my second question is, do I have to use container? Can I have a libvirt to
Oh.
have a VM?
Sure. I was just trying to create a very simple self-contained environment for us to iterate on while we're here.
Okay.
You could do all those things.
Okay. The third question is, can I try to ping from my host hypervisor to the VM? Would that work?
Ping from the host. So from my Mac, I'm not going to have a route to 172.16. So probably not.
Okay. Because
But theoretically, right, I have a connection, right? I believe they're all in
Yeah.
the same fib.
yeah, because my configuration is, I may try a different thing. So I try to do libvirt to create a network between the host and the VM. So they are in the same network. So I'm trying to ping from the host to the VM, and ping the VM, or ping from the VM to the host, because they have like virt.io a bridge between them.
Okay, so you're not, it's one flat IP net namespace, or one flat IP address space,
Right.
right?
Right.
Yeah, it should work. So the issue here is, because these are all in the same fib, right? So this is my connection to my Mac, okay? From the Vagrant VM down
Right,
to the Mac.
right.
So on my Mac, I'm not going to have a route to why forward to that? Oh, what? Yeah, that's there. So I'm not going to have a route to 172.16, right? So if I start monkeying around with the routing table, it should all work, right? Because VPP is with the connection from my Mac to the net namespaces is in the same fib.
Okay.
So we could try that out.
So you have a few options to do that connectivity. One option is to use the standard virt.io interface connected to the host,
Right.
and then to basically attach AF packet to the same bridge group.
Okay.
Another option is to use vhost user interface, which is also something we have on VPP. So you can basically attach VPP directly to the QM
Okay.
and basically speak directly with the VM.
Okay, does SRIOV work?
No, it's basically a simple virt.io or vhost user interface.
If I use SRIOV,
If you
can-
use
can-
SRIOV, you have a problem that you need something to switch packets between you.
because SRIOV may have better performance than virt.io or bridging in case
Yes.
of I/O virtualization.
But then you need to have a physical NIC for that. In this setup, we don't have a physical NIC.
I have.
He'd have a VM running on his Mac, so it's an emulated
Right.
environment.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a physical NIC. But
But he's not using that one. It's
Okay.
a Mac, so it's a NIC which is assigned to the OS X. It's not a
okay.
physical NIC.
Okay.
So his setup with the Vagrant is basically a virtualized NIC, and he is using this virtualized NIC to talk with Vagrant VM.
Okay.
But it won't record any better.
Yeah, the general idea here is you're doing the development on these virtualized setups, and then potentially deploying on real iron, right?
Yeah, typically, how would you put it? When I'm developing, I very often will spin up, a set of VMs or container namespaces, however you want to do it, to get things, to get functional correctness. Then to do performance work, you really want to, spin the stuff up and hit it with a traffic generator. But yeah. It's, for the purposes of the tutorial, I mean, it's very much a, go set up a couple of paravirtualized NICs, and
Yeah.
pump traffic.
Right. The other thing is that most of these SRIOV, PCI pass-through NICs have a switch on them.
Yeah.
And so if you were to, do PCI pass-through up to a KVM, you could use a switch to
Yeah.
basically forward the traffic. You only
Yeah.
get 50 gigabits that way, but,
Yeah, I guess, we certainly have, many a time PCI direct mapped, a virtual or physical function into VPP and then done, whatever with it. That also kind of works. I mean, literally the same bits will run, on a host platform in a VM or in a container. Just depends what you want to spin up and how you want to do it, but it's a lot of config pain. The right way of saying it is, let me do a little bit of history on the
please.
VPP dispatcher and interrupt mode. I
And
guess,
we do have a DPDK session next
yeah,
too. So.
the dispatch interrupt is, the dispatcher is all set up to transition input nodes from polling to interrupt and back and forth. Generally, if I remember the numbers right, at about a vector size of 10, it stops taking interrupts and starts polling. Well, a vector size of 10, oh gosh, for doing IP4 racetrack stuff, I mean, you're starting to talk a number of millions of packets a second before it'll ever get there. So yeah, you can be a pretty good citizen up to the point. The thing is, for any one particular use case, you're either in a situation where you want to be really light on the CPU. You've got a bunch of container workloads, and by a bunch, I mean way enough to oversubscribe the number of cores you have. At that point, south of 1 million packets a second, you're almost never going to run at a vector size greater than 1. So on the other hand, if you're trying to do big scale, core router-ish performance as of 10 years ago, where you're doing 100, 200, 300 million packets a second, which a big enough single server platform can do now, you really might as well poll because you're just simply going to lose too many packets if you don't.